I've got experience in seeing how the whole thing fits together from guys whenever they were juniors in high school all the way through playing their entire professional careers. I've now been in the NFL long enough that I've seen guys that I started with when I started the NFL that are actually already retired now, so that doesn't make me feel old at all. So, but anyway, just a little bit about me. My name's Brian Hudspeth. Obviously, I'm from a little small town in Mississippi called New Albany. It's not far from where the head coach is from. He and I talked about that this morning. They're about half hour apart, maybe 45 minutes. But it's a little small town, so I didn't grow up with a lot of big city lights and chasing this dream of working in the NFL. I didn't know anything about what it was even about. So, but how I started was I originally went to school at Southern Miss, University of Southern Mississippi, and when I left home, I thought I was going to be an engineer. And I thought I was smart, and then I got in college and I realized that everybody else was an A and B level student, and I was just a C level student. So, so I got into engineering quickly. So I was kind of looking for my place, and as time went along, I ended up transferring to Mississippi State, transferred back to Southern Miss. So I was kind of looking for my place in life, and I finally found it in sports and sport administration. And I was at Southern Miss, and I was finishing up my degree. I had the opportunity to go out and coach, do student practicums, just like you guys, I'm sure, are all doing. I had a chance to go out and be a practicum coach or a student intern coach, whatever you want to call it these days, at a local high school. Well, that local high school ends up being one of the largest ones in the state of Mississippi. Very successful. The head coach, where Brett Favre is the OC right now, that high school, the head coach he coaches for is the head coach I coached under. Neville Barr, the guy you see on ESPN that's standing out there as the head coach. I coached under him at a rival high school across town. So that's where I got my start. And through that process, we had a kid come in, or we had a couple of kids that were really good. We had recruiters coming in from different schools, from schools as big as Tennessee to schools as small as Rice in the lower levels. But I got to know Randy Sanders, who was the recruiting coordinator at the time at the University of Tennessee. So, I helped. This was I still had a year to go in school, but I met Randy, and just like what you guys are doing right now, I let him know what my goals were and what I wanted to do in life. I wanted to be in football. I didn't know if I wanted to stay on the coaching side or if I wanted to get into big time college athletics and get on, the recruiting side, but I knew I wanted to be in it. And so, I kind of was just filling it out, made a contact with him and that sort of thing. And so I finished out the year coaching at this high school. We ended up being pretty successful. We were 10-0 in the regular season, ranked third in the state. We go to the playoffs and lose in the first round. So next year rolls around, we're not nearly as good. But the key is we had one kid that was, like I said, was somebody that everybody recruited. And so as those coaches came through there, I made all the contacts that I could. And to give you a little story real quickly on the side note, how those contacts have come into full play is I now call on one of those coaches at another school at Ole Miss. I met him 20 years ago when I was a student practicum, just like you guys are. Now I call on that same coach as a source at Ole Miss because he's now the pro liaison that handles NFL scouts. That's how it comes full circle. So you just never know when your path's going to cross with somebody again, just as a sidebar. But he was at Rice at the time whenever I met him. But anyway, the next year rolls around, that kid got offered by Alabama, all the big schools, Tennessee, everybody else. But he was the first pick or not the first overall pick, but it was a first round pick in Major League Baseball by at the time Montreal Expos. So he goes the baseball route. So, but I rode that kid's coattails kind of out of Mississippi because whenever the next year rolls around, we're a 500 football team. We finished that season, and I graduate in December. Well, I call up Randy Sanders. I'd applied at Mississippi State to grad school, Southern Miss. I was already in those two programs, and I applied at Tennessee because I had family that lived in Knoxville, and I always wanted to go to school there. So I call up Randy Sanders on a whim, and I say, I don't know if you remember me or not. I gave him the kid's name, which was Tootie Myers, by the way. You can look him up. It's Clarence Myers Jr. But he remembered Tootie, obviously, because he was a good player. And he said, well, why don't you come in and we'll sit down and talk. So I'd already gotten school at Tennessee. I show up. We sat down and talked. And he said, I don't have anything for you right now. I can't give you, a full-time job. I don't have a graduate assistantship. I don't even have any money as a student assistant. But you can come in and volunteer. No pun intended. You can come in and volunteer. I was like, okay, well, I'll do what I have to do because I want to do this. So I go in and I start volunteering. So for about 6 months, I'm just folding letters, stuffing envelopes, helping with coaching clinic, helping with, it was Peyton's spring that he was there, and, pro days when scouts would come around, and just doing anything I could, just trying to be involved. Well, I guess I worked hard enough that somebody took notice, and that person was Coach Fulmer, and Coach Fulmer hired or gave me a graduate assistantship about May of that year. This was '98. And so I think I'm on cloud nine. I'm the hardest worker ever and everything else. And it had a lot to do with timing because Mark Ingram was moving up. who's now the athletic director at University of Alabama, Birmingham. And Mark was moving up into the athletic department, so I took his role as a graduate assistant in football operations and recruiting. Well, we go on to win the national championship in '98, and which was a fun time. And so the spring rolls around, I get hired full time in the summer of '99. So now I'm a full-time employee. I'm at Tennessee. I'm on cloud nine. We're a top 5 football program. We just won the national championship. My career is just going to launch from here. I'm already thinking about where I'm going to be the next AD and all that kind of stuff. So, but as you go along, you realize in life that you got a lot of growing to do. It's good to get that first opportunity, but then you have to kind of just grow from there. And sometimes some people you'll see, some of your colleagues grow at a faster rate. Sometimes you'll see people that don't grow at all. There's some guys that are still at Tennessee now in the same role they were in when I was there 15 years ago. And that's fine too, but it just depends on what your goals are in life and what you want to do. So, but you always have to kind of keep your eyes open. So I'm at Tennessee and I'm working full time, and I think that it's the greatest job ever, except I'm not making any money. I'm not ashamed to tell you, I'm making $17,000 as a full-time employee with a master's degree. And I'm like, it's gotta be more in life than this, It's great to be here, but I'm making $17,000. And I'm a football operations assistant, and I'm getting Coach Fulmer's laundry, I'm getting his oil change his car, I'm picking up his kids from diving practice and taking them to softball practice. So you have to do those things. You have to make those sacrifices. Yeah, it's humbling work, and you're sitting there going, man, I've got a master's degree, I'm educated, I've got student loans, I got to pay my bills, and I'm sitting here picking up somebody's kids from, diving practice and stuff like that. So it was one of those situations to where you start kind of looking around, and you start keeping your eyes open for opportunities. I had the opportunity to go to Oregon with Mike Bellotti, and I stayed at Tennessee. Coach Fulmer recruited me well to stay. Had an opportunity to go to TCU with Francione when he was there right before he went to Alabama, and actually accepted that job, but Coach Fulmer recruited me to stay. So I stayed at Tennessee. And then finally I had an opportunity to go when Pete Carroll first got the SC job. I had an opportunity to go with Pete Carroll, and it kind of dissolved at the last minute and never really came to fruition. But I stayed at Tennessee, and so I was loyal, and I stayed there. So I put in 3 years at Tennessee, but through that time, like I said, I didn't know that I wanted to be in scouting. I didn't know where this was going. I thought I was going to be an AD and kind of go that route. But I kept my mind open about opportunities and kept my mind open about different experiences. And obviously I'm working in recruiting, and I know what football players are, and we're getting highly rated recruiting classes at Tennessee, the top 25 every year and stuff like that. So I get to know scouts as they come through, and just the more scouts that come through, the more you get to know people. But there's a scout that came through with the Atlanta Falcons, whose name was Taylor Morton. He's now the director of player personnel at the St. Louis Rams. And I was like, this name sounds familiar. Where do I know this guy from? When I was at Southern Miss, he came in. He was a GA at Auburn. He came in and spoke in a class just like this. And I remembered him from whenever he stood up here and talked to me, sitting in that chair. And I was like, I remember that guy from Southern Miss. So I reached out to him via email after I saw him at Tennessee or whatever. And I reached out to him and told him what I was trying to do. I said, I want to get in the NFL. I'm willing to leave a full-time job with benefits, making, $17,500 at this point, because I'd gotten a couple raises, So I've got about a $500 raise in 2 years. But I'm willing to leave a full-time job and sacrifice to go get an internship to get in the NFL. I know that sounds insane these days, right? With the economy and the way everything is, but I told him what I wanted to do. And so we started going through the interview process, and they brought me in. I interviewed for a role as a scouting assistant. It was basically a salary position with no benefits. So I'm essentially leaving a full-time job to take a role at the Atlanta Falcons making $14,000 a year. So that's what I wanted to be a scout. So I take this internship, or glorified internship is what it was, at the Atlanta Falcons, making $14,000 with no benefits, and I get there year one, and the Smith family sells the team to Arthur Blank. So then there's rumors everybody's going to be fired. Well, I never experienced that, because at Tennessee we were always successful, so everything was always stable. So I hear all these rumors that everybody's going to be fired, and there's going to be this complete turnover from top to bottom. So now I'm sitting there going, well, this is a good career path I'm on here. I've left a full-time job at a top 25 program. I've taken less money with no benefits for a team that's just sold, and sounds like everybody's going to get fired. So I say all that just to say that there's going to be lots of ups and downs in your career. I go on and I stay at the Falcons for 2 more seasons. We drafted Michael Vick. We had the #1 pick when I first got there. We drafted Michael Vick. I go through 2 more seasons there. I end up getting a job with the Houston Texans because I grew and I, wanted to grow some more. And frankly, we were all let go 2 years later when Vic broke his leg that preseason and we didn't win enough games. We were all let go anyway. So I ended up with the Houston Texans. I spent 5 seasons there, growing increments. Came in as a scouting assistant again, and then I grew into more of a pro scouting role, and I grew into a college scouting role. So by the time I left the Texans after 5 years, I was a full-time area scout on the road, which is what I do now. So spent 5 years in Houston, then my contract was up there, and I go to Tampa, and I've been in Tampa for 7 years, and I pretty much scouted every state, in the country at this point, minus a few that we talked about earlier, Dave and I talked about. But I tell you all that just to say that you never know, your career can do this, and you got to be prepared for that in this business, because there's going to be days to where you're going to think, man, do I really want to do this? This is hard work. Everybody wants your job. They got a stack of applications and resumes. There's way more people that want these jobs than there are actually jobs. So keep that in mind. So it's very competitive, and it's very competitive where I am. I never heard the term, it's a cutthroat business until I got in the NFL, and it really is cutthroat. I mean, it's just because you make it to a certain position or you make it to a certain team, you still got to grind, and you still got to get better, and you still got to professionally grow, and you still got to network, and you still have to really, really work to be where you are, because somebody else is coming for you. There's somebody else is more hungry than you are. Somebody else is willing to do it for less money. Somebody else is willing to, come in and that doesn't have a family or willing to, make the bigger sacrifice. So I say all that to say this, that one of the things I learned at Tennessee was the value of networking through Coach Fulmer. And just like I told you that story about Taylor Morton, because just like I'm standing here right now, 10 years from now, you guys may remember me standing here, and I may be able to help you. It may be 10 months from now, it may be 10 years from now, but you have to develop your professional network in this business. It's not like any other business, it's very unique. And I used it, and I've spoke to other people about this before, and I've used the acronym. I know everybody here watches ESPN, and I've used this acronym before. And I learned some of this from Mitch Barnhart, who's the AD at Kentucky, because when I was at Tennessee in one of my graduate classes, Carmen Tagano had me actually call, because I wanted to be an AD, he had me call an AD and actually sit down and ask him a series of questions and find out what that person did and was it truly for me. And so Mitch Barnhart kind of gave me some of this information too, but I use the acronym ESPN. The E stands for experience. You've got to do whatever it is you got to do to get experience. You can't work in sports if you're selling cell phones at the mall, at T-Mobile. Nothing wrong with selling phones at T-Mobile at the mall, but you're not going to get experience in sports doing that. So whatever you have to do, whether it's volunteer like I did in the football office, just whether and no job can be too small. Whether you're folding letters and putting stamps on envelopes, or picking up people's kids at swim practice, getting oil change in coaches' cars, that's just what it is. I mean, you have to pay some dues, and you have to get, like I tell kids all the time, they ask me how I got my role. You don't build a football resume without being in football. So you have to do what you have to do. So the experience is the key. You have to get experience, whether it's volunteer to do events, whether it's volunteering in the football office, whether it's working as an intern, in the summer, you got to do what you got to do to get experience. And second, the S stands for sacrifice. You got to sacrifice. You can't say, I don't know if you guys are all from Georgia, but you can't say, I heard so many times at Tennessee when I was in grad school, I want to be the marketing director for the Atlanta Braves. Well, that's great. It's great to have that career goal, but that's very specific. That's one job. Then you can't just go through life thinking that that's the one thing I'm going to do and that's the only job I'm going to accept. You have to be willing to sacrifice and go wherever. Like I told you, not that my path's the right path, but I sacrificed a full-time job with benefits in a state institution in a top 5 football program to take an internship because I wanted to take the next step. And nobody was offering me a full-time job to come be a scout. I had to go learn how to be a scout. So I had to get the experience, and I had to sacrifice. That's the E and the S. The P is you have to persevere. There's going to be a lot of days when you're selling tickets at the Tulsa Talons, and you're making $15,000 a year, and you're on commission, and you're clearing 25. There's going to be a lot of days where you go, man, I just really go back to Atlanta and sell insurance. I want to go back closer to home and coach high school football, whatever. But you have to persevere, and that's the key, because there's going to be more bad days than there are good days sometimes. And like I told you, every time I've been fired twice. I was fired in Atlanta, I was fired in Houston. 2 times my contract ran out, and we just made coaching changes. I could have just walked away and said, what the heck to this? I'm going to do something else in life. I'll go drive a bus or something. Not that there's anything wrong with driving a bus, but you have to persevere and you have to be confident in yourself. And then the last thing is the N is network. So we're ESPN, the last one being network. You have to continue to network. I still network to this day. Dave and I were roughly at Tennessee at the same time, kind of met up, and here I am calling on him today about guys we're scouting here. Like I was telling you with the coach from Rice from 20 years ago. He's now the pro liaison at Ole Miss, and I call on him. So you're constantly networking, and that's the only way. Hard work only gets you so far in any industry, but especially in sports. You got to have somebody pull you forward. You've got to have a mentor. You've got to have somebody that sees the value in you and pulls you along and helps you. It may not necessarily be that they hire you and put you in every position that you have in life, but there has to be people that you reach out to. Charlie Casserly's mine. The guy that you met walking across that bridge, Rob Kissel, a scout with the Texans that was here today also. Rob actually interviewed me when I left Tennessee also at the Texans. And so whenever I needed a job 3 years later, when I got fired in Atlanta because we didn't win enough games and Vic broke his leg, I reached out to the Houston Texans guy. They brought me in. They didn't even bring me in for an interview. They remembered me from interviewing the first time and offered me another job. So you just never know where your next paycheck's coming from. So you're constantly networking. Dave and I were talking on the way in. I'm going to another game tomorrow at UT Chattanooga, where the athletic director there was at Tennessee with us, was one of the associate ADs there. And I'm obviously going to work, but I reached out to him and said I was going to be in town. Wanted to just meet with him a few minutes before the game. And he said, no, you come sit in my box with me. It's like, well, I really need to work. I don't really need to go sit in somebody's box on game day. I really need to have some things I need to get done, but I will take that opportunity to do it because you never know where your next paycheck's coming from. I mean, we just drafted Jameis Winston. If we go 4-12, they may fire us in Tampa. So it's just definitely, just keep that in mind. As you go through all this, you may not remember anything I said about my past or my background or anything else, but just remember ESPN. You got to get experience. You got to sacrifice to be in this business, and it's a tough business. You got to persevere. You got to keep grinding, and if you really want to do it and you really love it, and just saying I love sports and all that's great, but you really got to persevere to get through it, and then you got to keep networking, and that's the only way. That's the only way that this goes for you, and you can build a career. You just have to get that experience. You got to sacrifice, persevere, and network. Any questions?
Cool. Awesome. Thanks. You guys got any questions?
How is the travel like?
The travel?
Look at the schedule.
It's a feast or famine. I have 3 months off in the summer where I go play golf and go fishing and travel the world, and then I have 4 months in the fall where I don't have a day off. There's 2 divisions of scouting. There's pro scouting and there's college scouting. The pro scouts work from the office. They scout the pro, they scout obviously the other pro leagues, but they also scout the other teams in the NFL for trades and free agent waivers and stuff like that. If we're going to sign a free agent or we're going to bring a guy from the practice squad or down. So those guys work from the office. There's about 3 of those at every team. So they get to sleep in their own beds. But then there's usually about 7 or 8 of us, depending on, every team does it differently. But imagine the United States map. We divide it up into territories just like sales territories. And so every scout's responsible for a region. They're called area scouts or regional scouts or whatever. But every scout is responsible for a region. So most teams will let you set up, most bosses at the teams will let you set your schedule up how you want to set it up. And you just have to make sure you get all those schools covered that they want you to cover. Now, some guys that are single, that aren't married and don't have children, may stay out for 3 or 4 weeks at a time, because they don't mind being on the road. There's some guys who have children that like to be centrally located so they can be home about every 8 to 10 days. So I'm not married and don't have children or any of that kind of stuff, but I still structure my schedule because I'm old and I don't like being on the road but a lot of times, but I still structure my schedule to where I'm at home about every 10 days. And then when I come home, I usually try to stay at home about 4 to 5 days. Because you can definitely see the difference in the work on day 1 and day 10. And when you get to about that 10-day mark, when you're at about a week and a half, you start getting mentally fatigued. And sometimes you just need to sleep in your own bed. You need to sit on your own couch and watch your own TV because, trust me, all the Marriotts look just alike on the inside. Every courtyard, they all bought the furniture at the same spot.
Because I want to be a baseball scout, I'm sure.
That insane travel. Yeah. Baseball guys the seasons are longer because you got all that summer stuff and you hit a lot more schools because you got guys that do just high school. There's guys that do JUCO, just JUCO. There's guys that obviously do all the colleges. my younger brother was at Ole Miss and worked in baseball, and he knows several baseball scouts that talk about how insane their travel is. But they have also smaller regions too, though, because there's more teams. Obviously, we're college